Hello and welcome to Way of the Leader. In this podcast, I interview John Q. Khosravi Esquire, immigration lawyer and entrepreneur extraordinaire, and hear about how he went from just a solopreneur, one person in the business, or one, maybe two, to having an entire team with designs on world domination and how content creation affected him. In this, unfortunately, sometimes the audio does get a bit funny, so I do apologize for that in advance. But regardless, enjoy. Hello there, and welcome to Way of the Leader podcast. Today, we've got a very special guest. We are interviewing John Q. Khosravi Esquire. Welcome, John. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. So let's start everything off and just have a discussion around who you are. Give us a little quick background of John Q. Khosravi.
Yeah, the question of who I am is always is different every day. But right now, I'm an immigration lawyer. I help people come to America, live their dreams, and find a place to be able to thrive globally, as well as have a training program called the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox, which is a media organization primarily. It helps educate immigration lawyers to be better lawyers. They'll promote top immigration lawyers so people know about them in the game. But I guess a little deeper than that, my family's originally from Iran. I was born here myself, born and raised in Los Angeles for the most part. And I just love learning, and I love getting that information that I learned and sharing with people so they have a development that I've had from the knowledge I've accumulated in my life. And the peace it's created and success it's created for me, I like to take that in and give it out. As an internal sense of satisfaction comes from that. And I've realized the law is kind of the same thing. I learned all this complex legal stuff, and I share that with my clients, other lawyers, so they could get a better life as well. I think that's like my purpose on earth, is to be this machine that eats up random chaos and organizes it for other people.
That's a great mission statement. I love it. So, in terms of being like a business owner, then how long is it that you've been in business?
Well, it just popped in my head. As a kid, I was always into business. So I would go to school and sell candy. I could buy from Costco. It was Price Club back then, but it was like for 5 cents. I sell for a quarter, that kind of stuff. But when I really got serious business was about 10 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago-ish, where I decided to have my law firm. And so I left and just started from scratch and kept it really simple for almost 8, 9 years, just myself doing everything until kind of plateaued in a sense. I got bored doing the same thing. So I thought I'd, take things to the next level for various reasons we'll talk about. So I started, a real business as opposed to me doing everything. And now I have a team, and I want to grow that team up. And I have two companies, so I want to go with both teams.
Wonderful. And so when did you decide? You said 8 or 9 years of doing the same thing before you actually made that change. Mm-hmm. So how long has that been now?
It's been around 2 years now. Really, at the start of COVID is when it really was the impetus where it got pushed. So COVID was 2020, now it's 2023. Maybe it's 3 years now where things changed. So when COVID happened, I saw my stats and my analytics were going down when it comes to people finding me. And I was like, oh no, the business might be going down because COVID was happening. So I doubled, tripled, and quadrupled down and made a lot of online content. And at the time, I would edit my own videos and stuff and upload it, which started taking more and more time. So I eventually hired a person. I was afraid of hiring another lawyer, someone on the legal side of the business, because the consequences of errors it could be really drastic. So I was afraid of that. But having someone edit a video and upload it is bad. It's not that harmful. So as I would do more recordings, it would go more viral-ish, I would say, and more business would come. Around the same time, actually, to back it up a little bit, because I was a full solo doing everything myself, answering phones, copy printing, I was starting to get burned out from that. So I created a second company to train other immigration lawyers and learn what I do. And because I was going to, clean up the practice area and go, part of that program was training on how to do marketing. So I was just going to teach them marketing a business. It coincided with COVID happening. And in one sense, the additional video creation and content creation I made was one, to learn more about marketing so I could teach the students who are part of my course. But also because the law firm was going down, I'm like, well, this is the one that pays, the cash flow comes from the law firm. I need to focus on that. So it's double whammy of those got me into making more content, which got more business, which meant I needed more team members to help edit, post, and all this kind of stuff. And I had a big fear for 10 years of hiring people because of headaches. But once I was forced to do it, and I started hiring this less detrimental kind of group that could hurt the business. I'm like, okay, it's not that bad. It's not as awkward, managing a team and talking with them and managing them. I was afraid of being a boss and stuff like that because it felt awkward to tell people what to do. But I realized not telling people what to do. We're working together as a team, and it's just we're working together one goal. And I have a better perspective on the whole operation, so I have to lead it. And it's my name and it is my business. So that opened it up, and then I was able to hire people that work on the legal side too. And then that really cleared up a lot of my time. One is, the video editing and stuff like that, which I enjoy doing, frankly, but I don't have the time to do. And other people do it much better quality than I do. That opened up a lot. But then once another lawyer came on board, that then freed me to stop working in the business and start working on the business. That was a huge shift that occurred. It was a massive shift in my perspective of who I am, my position, what I do, how I think about things. Instead of on a day-to-day basis, more month-to-month, year-to-year, I always have to keep my focus on. And that just changes my complete perspective, almost as if the difference between, if you're riding a bicycle on the street in your neighborhood, you see like all the stores, but if you're in an airplane, you see like this huge panoramic perspective of things.
It's so interesting that you talk about that, because I literally had this conversation with a very good friend of mine who's a good marketer, and he talks about this idea about like the higher up you get, the more that kind of perspective, and you're literally seeing the future if you're witnessing two cars crossing each other. But if you're in that car, from the perspective of the driver, you just see straight ahead of you. You just see the road ahead. You can't see where that car is going. So It's interesting that you say that. And there's so much in what you just said as well about, talking about all the hats that you wear, talking about how many different aspects of the business that you've been working through as well. And then obviously, you've been, doing the law firm side of things, but then the content creation side of the editing side of things. And there's so much to deal with. And that almost forced you to take on people. And the fact that taking on people, your name is on the door, your reputation is at stake, so to speak. So there's so many different angles to talk about this. So let's kick into. I think it's a great segue for our first question, which is, leadership is a word that's tossed around quite a lot, and a lot of people, it's got a lot of baggage around it. And so all I want you to do, please, for us is I want you to define leadership in your own words.
Sure. I thought about this question. I had a good answer, which I completely spaced out on right now. But just to be real, leadership is just taking the lead, and as the word goes, and guiding people to the where you think is best for everyone in the team, in the organization. At the end of the day, although, like, for example, I am the owner of the law firm, I am an employee of it too, and I always have to think of it as this team mechanism. How's the whole thing going to work? It's like, how do I take this artificial person, this corporation, and take next place, and keep all the dynamics of it working properly in the direction that we're going. So it's just leading, and that's as simple as that. I had a better answer, I forgot, but I would just say leadership is just leading, and with all the baggage that does come from that, being the leader, because we are human beings, and there's a lot of psychological issues that come into play.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's the thing. Like whenever I speak to people and they define leadership as like the visionary, it's usually people who are also not practical about leadership, which is not to say that leaders can't be visionary, but just to say that, it seems like your answer is incredibly grounded. And that's absolutely who you are, as well as you're a very real person. And I can imagine as a leader, as a boss, you're incredibly grounded too. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, and so let's talk about your leadership journey. And so, if you're happy to share, what were some of the points of leadership that you felt perhaps you were terrible at, you struggled with when you started, but now you seem to be quite comfortable with?
Yeah, I would say fully comfortable, but there's a couple of different stuff. I mean, when the first team members I hired, they wouldn't do their job. They would kind of talk back to me and stuff, and I was making a big pushover. And I was trying to be nice, and then realized, like, don't take kindness for weakness in a sense. So then having to fire them was really hard, but now that's gotten much easier. It's never gets easy, but at the same time, if someone is not matching up, it's like, it doesn't make sense to be with us. It's beneficial for you to go and find what's suitable for you to thrive, because you're not going to thrive here, obviously. So that was a big thing, and just keeping people on tasks and make sure they're doing what they're doing and not losing track. Not trying to jump in and manage things. So the problem is, like, I find myself still going and doing things myself, or micromanaging, which is I don't believe in doing. So it's kind of like I got to take myself out. The team member has to figure out how to do it on their own, or help them figure out on their own, in a sense to help them become a leader as well. So a leader makes more leaders. That's the way this is going to work. So if they can rise up to the occasion, that's perfect. If they don't, then we got to find someone else. And so and one part of even now we're having is like, some people that's the leadership, which is fine. They just do the role, but we got to find someone who's gonna be a leader there. But then that creates the problem of like, oh, I got to go recruiting now. As a leadership position, I think the most important thing I have is actually the recruiting aspect, recruiting and maintaining talent. That's like my number one thing I have to do. And once I started having a team, I realized it's all about recruiting and maintaining talent, and then them do everything. So it really takes me out of being a lawyer or being a content creator. Is just like I need to find talent as a leader and maintain them. So that might be a definition of leadership right there, a partial definition at least.
Well, it's quite interesting. I wanted to echo something that you just said, which was this this concept of a good leader makes other people better leaders as well. Literally the idea of like you hire one employee, and the more you invest in them to become a leader, then you can employ people underneath them to take away more portions. And so leaders make leaders. And that's a wonderful point. I think that's a much overlooked point when leadership is in a discussion at the moment. Yeah. And as you said, leadership becomes about recruiting as well. Like that's huge. I mean, how many people fight with recruitment as something that they resist for so long? And then the recruitment has a whole bunch of skills attached to it. So just quickly on the recruitment side of things, what have you found to be the greatest thing to help you when you're going through that recruitment process?
I've gotten better at it, even from the basic level and starting employees, is knowing what learning curve there. Ideally, and one thing I want to do as part of my lawyer training course and law firm training courses, learning what these are so I could then tell other people what they are so I don't have to go through what I have to go through. And like, for example, when we're hiring, now we have tests that we do to see how quickly someone could figure out a certain process. And I have more understanding of trying to catch people are real or not in an interview, but more likely it's just what their goals are and asking who they are and what their plans are going to be. So like if people are just finding a job just to do it, that may not, we're not a place for a job. Maybe a big corporation has 10,000 employees. They need people to do just a job 9 to 5, but we're essentially a small startup, even though it's a law firm in the other business. So we need people who have a longer term perspective. And so I talk about that a lot. And I ask them, what is your goal for 1, 3, 5 years, 10 years from now? It's not a question many people ask themselves. It's an awkward question to answer because it requires a lot. But I, put it out there, let them think about it. And most of the time, people don't have good answers. But you kind of can tell by me asking that. That's the kind of perspective I have. That's where I'm going. And if you keep that thought process up, if they do a trial period of hiring and we're talking with them, if they don't get to the point of like, listen, I'm thinking 10 years down the line. That's how people are successful. It's not thinking, tomorrow is going to happen. Today was going to happen. Success, people who are, wealthy and have businesses and have happy lives, frankly, with their family. They're thinking 5, 10, 15 years down the line. If you're thinking day by day, hour by hour, you're not going to have success. You're just struggling. So if they don't get on the boat, then they got to get off the boat, stay off the boat. But the process of just having to test them, having regular conversations with them at the beginning to just weed out people as soon as possible if they're not good, because once those signs come out that they're not good with their required responses or the delays and stuff, you got to cut them really quick. And I've had it where it lingers and lingers. And what happens is they'll be doing the basic job. And I'm like, well, they're doing this for now. It gives me time to focus on something else. But the more they're there doing the basic job, the less time I have, or it pushes back me getting someone else in that position that's good for what they do. And so I've had that problem happen. Cutting somebody is going to create more load on other places, and it creates more difficulty. But that difficulty is then going to force us to recruit someone that's good. What I found is in life, as much as sometimes I'll think, I'm above this, I'm not. Evolution comes from pain and force. Very rarely do people evolve voluntarily or on their own. And just like I became a leader through force. I was too scared of doing it, but I was forced to do it. Hiring and recruiting, even though I believe it's the right thing to do, it's a lot more work and it requires a lot more commitment. And there's a financial cost. I got to maybe pay people for a couple months to see how they're doing. I got to interview 10, 20 people, have practice tests or practice questions and posts. And it's a lot of capital and attention goes to it. But it's something that's really important to do. And just, kind of test people out, see who shows up, talk with them, have multiple rounds, maybe of interviews. So make sure all the team members like them. And that requires more time and commitment and resources. But it's worth it because from reading a lot of books on this topic, And I've learned that, having one star player is like having 10 mediocre employees. So if I have like 3 people that are stars, it's better than having a company of 30 people. The 30 people is just overhead. That's going to be a drag. So I realized it's better that I go through 100 people and find the one person than after 10, 20 people, I'd be like, let's just settle for this one. And that's what most people do in life and frankly, everything else. Just looking at the house I bought right here, we went through literally 100 houses before we found this one, and 99 of them. And we spent. Luckily, I work from home and have flexibility. I can work at night, so we're just house to house to house. And we put down offers for 5 or 6 houses, and luckily we're outbid. The houses were straight up garbage, but in this market we have in Los Angeles, it was out of control. Prices will go up, 500,000 more than the price that starting was. This crazy stuff, and it still is like that for the most part. But luckily, the ones we were settling on, we didn't get. When we found the one we want, like, oh my god, I can't believe it existed. And so these gems are out there. It's kind of like dating too. I found my wife. You date a lot of frogs until you find the princess. So it's like you got to go through a lot, but it's worth it in the end to find that one that fits the piece. It just takes a lot of resources, but there's a 10x equal to the 10x that comes from it. So you always got to remember, like, yeah, it might take a while to recruit and it might be hard. And I got to tell myself this, but if I find the right person, it's going to make things super easy. So it's like, during a short period of time, you experience a lot of pain, but then it goes easy, just like everything in life, instead of just dealing with low levels of pain over a long period of time, which actually is much worse, more total amount of pain you have to deal with.
100%. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more on a lot of this. And I think, like echoing the words of the most recent person that sticks out in my mind is, of course, Alex Hormozy saying, hire slowly, fire fast, for this particular piece here that you're talking about as well. Find the right person, the right fit, give some people some time, but cut your losses faster. So that's amazing. So
there's another guy that was saying hire fast and fire fast because it's hard to tell how someone is during an interview. They might not be good at interviews, or you might have had a bad day, for example. So I have a mix. But my goal this year, which I haven't reached it, but it's like for a certain role that we have that we were at quality, is every 3 months hire for that role, even though we don't need it, and have like practice work. That's especially we're paying them just to practice for 3 or 4 months so that enough work comes in for them. But by constantly doing that, we're going to constantly be like going to people and keep the best people in there. And the people that exist will get inspired from the new people coming in to know, okay, like this is how the work, get different ideas from them and different energy from them. But to really, one is because we have our business has a chance of doubling up like every 6 months or a year. Like we need to have people ahead of time so we don't get hit really hard. So sometimes we have to like hire ahead of time, knowing that that's going to happen and have them ready for that. But at the same time, when people come, we might think a certain standard is normal. Then someone comes and knocks it out the park, and it's like, oh, wow, what we thought was maybe 10 hours to do this thing. This guy did it in 3 hours. Maybe that 10 hours standard wasn't what expectation. So this was better. Right. And so at the end of the day, it's a business, and like we have to do things more efficiently as possible. So if we start getting people that are much better, then okay, it is what it is. The other team members learn from them, see what they're doing that makes it faster, and take their game up to the next level. And with that, more cost savings, raises covered, all that kind of stuff too. But it's a business. We got to keep it going.
Wow. Perfect. So, well, talking about this as well, we're talking about this aspect. And so I guess what I wanted to get into now with you is this idea of like, we talked about the leadership stuff that you were struggling with at the beginning. And I wanted to ask you like, well, what did you do to get better? So we've been talking about recruitment. So let's ask that question is like, what exactly did you do to get better at recruitment?
Well, we do a lot of, there's just 2 levels of recruitment. One is the websites where you post and stuff like that have better definitions, have better ways of weeding out people who are coming in and sticking with it. And just spending more time trying to get a bigger pool of people, candidates coming your way. So that's one aspect. But some of our best employees are people that reached out to us randomly on their own. So one thing I realized is, so I have like my law firm, which has a podcast, but I also have this Immigration Lawyers Toolbox training course as a podcast. So I do 2 podcasts. And, people find that podcast, they reach out to me, say they want to work with me. And so a lot of it, and he talks about Alex Hormozy. I've seen one of his podcasts. Says one of the reasons he's so public on social media is because it makes recruiting talent so much easier on these companies he wants to buy, because they know who he is and what he's about, what his principles are, so they want to work for him. So our top employee that one of our top employees that we found was a guy that was a follower, and he reached out and said all the good right things. And it was not because I recruited him, but I just had my personality and my game plan out there, and people were on page with that and they wanted to participate in it as well. And so that was the thing. I realized a lot of videos I do maybe towards getting clients and stuff, but there's people in our field that have taken notice and they watch me and they more and more like, well, I'm working at this firm. I work a 9 to 5 that pays well. Maybe it'll pay more than I will, but they don't have the spirit and the passion what they're doing and these ideas I'm doing. Like, for example, I'm creating workshops and conferences. I have a trade magazine. I have multiple podcasts, which I want my team members to be on video. I want them to learn different languages. I want them to travel the world and connect clients, create a global. There's all these ideas I put out there that it's not typical in the humdrum, boring world of law, especially immigration law, where it's the same thing every day out. And, the ones that find that exciting will hear it and they'll contact me. So it's recruitment, and then people who are potential clients will see us too, like, well, this guy really loves immigration law. I need to hire him as this firm as a lawyer because they're really into it. So it has a it's a double-edged sword in a positive way, cut each way on it. So that's one aspect that's really important.
That's crazy. It's absolutely incredible as well. I think like you definitely inspire me to think beyond the scope of what my business is or what I define it as. Because like you just said, immigration law is typically this humdrum thing, but here you are, conferences, magazines. You've got 2 separate businesses as well with regard to how you actually have the law. And the point that you made about if you're a content creator, you attract people as well. And so it's so important to then make sure that your content creation puts across your values as well, to attract the right people. So that's incredible. I love that concept. Okay, cool. Well, so the question that I've got for you now is, what has been your greatest struggle that you found good leadership skills to be the solution for?
Struggles with leadership skills. It is really just giving out. There's a habit when you're breaking through escape velocity of the earth when going to space. Business owners who want to keep getting sucked back in and to do the day-to-day work of it. And I'm constantly at battle with that, especially because I don't have enough team members per se, or in certain trainings, or some things just require my attention to them. And so the struggle has been, how do I detach myself and say, listen, just give it to someone else to do. They may not be able to do it right the first time, may come back 80 times when you ask questions, but maybe on the 81st time they'll get it. So, it's constantly like just giving away responsibility as much as possible. And that's been a struggle, but the more I do it, the more comfortable I get. And the better results I end up seeing in the long term of it. So that's been a struggle, not getting sucked back into working in the business as opposed to, say, on the business.
Yeah, I was going to say that's the old E-myth revisited. Working on the business versus in the business is always the trade-off that we have to make as well. So that's great. That's fantastic. Well, speaking of looking back at time, if you could go back and give some advice to yourself to obviously get past all the struggles that you've gone through, like what advice would you have for yourself?
Well, one was get out of my comfort zone a couple years earlier to hire. It wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. So I wish I had started sooner, because I would have just been out there sooner. Because the last couple of years of when I was full solo, it was just it was getting boring, and I was making money and all that kind of stuff, but it was just boring. So if I start sooner, as you get older, you realize you have less and less time. So that's 3 years earlier I could have got here, but maybe then I didn't have to push to get me there. So I would have liked to start sooner and put myself in these uncomfortable positions to get myself there. But when it comes to advice, bias, and struggles, it's just don't think you need to do everything yourself. Just be comfortable in giving out responsibility. And the way it just naturally happened was give away responsibility for things that aren't that big a deal at first. And once you get comfortable with that, you give them more bigger stuff. So if I originally had hired people that could take away responsibilities of mine that were of consequence, that would have opened me up and be more comfortable in giving up stuff that have consequence earlier. But that was the thing. I was 100%, I got to do everything myself. There's always a little bit you give someone else, and that little bit turns to a lot over time.
It's quite interesting that you say that, because something that I do with a lot of my coaching clients, actually, when we're coaching on the topic of leadership, is, I use this tool actually with coaching anything, is this idea of progressive overload. Like, what are you currently doing and how can we just do +1?
Yeah.
Just +1. Like, take what you're doing right now and just do plus, instead of having these lofty goals of, I'm going to start recruiting 25 people. Like, no, let's recruit 1. but I don't have enough work for one. Well, let's start leaning on that one with the stuff we're comfortable with once that's practiced. So it's very interesting that you say that as like good advice. Obviously, it's very much something that I find to be 100% true in my world as well. You need to go into this zone of +1 when you've got the strength for it, because it'll always benefit you. It'll always come back with a benefit. So
Sure.
Amazing. Cool. All right. Well, in asking this question, the next one is, of course, what are the resources that you use now that you wish you had known about in the past? Like, apart from the advice, now let's look resources.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different things. One is hiring low-cost employees overseas that could do certain technical aspects. That's the lower cost of it was a big deal, because if you hire in the United States at our rates, would have been hard to be able to afford that, especially if they're not good at what they do. All of a sudden, I'd have a big financial hit, and nothing would have come about it. So learning these websites and organizations that allow you to hire overseas was the number one thing that was really important. That helped me out in that endeavor. I wish I had that resource. Then secondly, is using technology properly. There's things like even using Gmail properly I didn't know, and I purchased some courses that taught me how to put stars and put labels on emails so they don't go inundate my inbox and all this kind of stuff. Inundate my inbox. Use all these third-party apps and stuff that really help smooth things out. So it's being comfortable with the technology, which takes a lot of time to learn. You got to sit and study it. So certain aspects. I had one software I was using with our team for 3 years. It's one of these team management kind of stuff, and we were using like 5% of it. And then now that I had other team members, all of a sudden a bunch of free time opened up because I wasn't working every day on it. So I went in that software and I started clicking on all the buttons. I'm like, oh, dude, this has like all this stuff that's really helpful. This is going to create so much more efficiency. We have information here. We got tracking here, this and that. And I'm like, what, dude? We had this whole time. It's like it's going to help so much better on various aspects, really important kind of stuff. Where somewhere I was doing manually on an Excel sheet, I just put it in here, and within instead of 5 minutes of time, it took 2 seconds of time. So it's definitely gains there of using the technology properly and spending time to learn it. It's kind of like recruiting and all this kind of stuff. You just got to spend time. Originally, that's a lot. We don't feel like it, but you got to do that. So one was recruiting overseas talent that was less expensive but good quality, and then secondly is using technology. And these together really are, I was thinking if I was 18, I was starting over again, I wouldn't become a lawyer. I'd use this technology and less expensive staff to make an agency of any kind. Like, there's no reason why an 18-year-old can't be making a ton of money. Right now, I've kind of taken my heels in too deep into being a lawyer, and it's like I'm kind of stuck. I have a family and stuff like that. If I was more aggressive when it comes to risk in business, I would have probably ditched this and just done marketing or something like that. But if you're 18, 19, you grew up in a digital age, and you have access to websites that give you recruiting, and you don't need that much money. You have technology. It's really easy to be really great, really fast on this kind of stuff. If you're younger, especially because you have less, more room to have losses and take it over and keep going. So it's just doing this stuff and doing it more and more, and just being conscious of the goal and which path you're going.
Yeah, 100%. I think, nailing it on the head, the amount of people who don't necessarily take full advantage of, various situations, like you say, like overseas hiring, that's, coming from South Africa, that's a big deal. There's a lot of South Africans who actually rely on overseas businesses to employ them, remotely as well. So that's a big deal. So yeah, 100%. And the technology piece, I mean, how much people are overwhelmed with technology, where if they knew how to use it, it could serve them so many different ways. So I think that's a huge piece. Thank you, John. That was great. All right. Well, so, as you know, we talk about leadership, we talk about self-care as well, the idea of self-empowerment and making sure that we're hitting these markers. So how have you prioritized self-care, as you've become more and more of a leader?
It's really important because, just getting older, and you see the consequences of unhealthy lifestyles coming to you. And I have 3 small kids, and getting winded, just chasing them down and stuff. So that was an important part. It was hard for me myself to pull the trigger. One is
going to the gym takes so much time to go. And I'm not a person if it was up to me, I'd sit on the couch all day. I wouldn't be running or doing any exercises. But with my wife's push, I got a personal trainer who comes to the house and when he's here, he's here. It's not, if he didn't come, I wouldn't work out, but he's at the door. I got to get out and work out. So that was an important thing. Sometimes it's a problem because I worked out 3 times this week. That's 3 hours, 3 hours. I should have answered emails and stuff, but it's no, by me taking the time to answer, to go and work out, if I take time to play some tennis, if I take the time to go for a walk, these are actually investments in the business because it clears my mind and relaxes me. So I can, again, think about a long-term perspective. And it's really been that when I go for a long walk, it seems like, oh, you're just walking, but this is something to the human body. If I go for a swim, if my trainer has come, I'm really thinking about something too much. The first 20 minutes of lifting weights with my trainer, I'll be constantly zoned out because I'll be thinking about something. But after 20 minutes, it goes away and it relaxes and I'm focused on what I'm doing. And my brain kind of like when I go back to that topic, I come with a different perspective. So the health aspect's really good with just being able to run around and not get tired. Is a confidence aspect because like I'm in better shape than I ever was. My muscles are bigger, my shoulders, my arms are bigger than they ever were. I wish I had the money when I was 16 to have a personal trainer come and help me out. It would be really cool in my personal life and just everything then. But it's just important. So when it comes down to priorities, as much as I love my family, they're important. Health is more important because I got to stay healthy to be able to take care of this family, both psychologically and financially and all that kind of stuff. So getting the health part's really important to carve out time and force yourself to say, this time is for this. And although I have a bunch of work to do and have deadlines, it is what it is. This is an important deadline because by getting your health, you're postponing potentially the deadline you're going to have in your life. That may push out that last day, an extra day longer, and it's worth it. And then sleep then comes into play. And I have a small baby, so sleep's been a hot mess. But make sure you do it. Now, I sleep less than most people. I realize what I need, but I need to make sure I get that. And it really comes from sleeping early. So for me, like it really is important to sleep as early as possible and try to turn off the phone and not want to look at an extra video or something like that before I go to sleep. Because that first couple hours of deep sleep I get, then I'm set for the next day. If I have 3 hours of starting deep sleep from 9:30 to 12:30, even though I wake up at 3:34, it's all good as long as I get that initial deep sleep. And it only happens if I go to sleep around 9:30ish. If I go to sleep at 11:30, then it throws my things out of whack and out of bounds.
It's so interesting that you talked about this because, of course, like, the follow-up question that we've got is how has this impacted your leadership? And you've already talked about it where you're saying these things of like, you become more focused, more productive. There's a healthy balance to take within this kind of stuff. We talk about sleep and movement, but there's a couple more things as well. And so, you naturally went there. You naturally talked about how it impacted your leadership and it has benefits. Very often, 100% on the money when someone is focused on the business, let health slide, and then realize the impact of health. They come back to it, and all of a sudden, business productivity, clarity, it all kind of benefits. And that person...
It must be the case for clients and employees and team members when they see me and I'm looking healthy and I look like I'm been exercising, they're going to have more confidence in me in which direction I'm taking the business and taking their case. So by looking healthy, you're going to feel much more confidence in the things that I do. And then the other aspect of like getting sleep and being alert and just what's my lack of sleep, or say like when I wake up really early as part of my health regimen, because I realize when I do sleep, when I stay in bed 7, 8, 9 hours, let's say from 9 to 8 or something like that, which typical person maybe 10 to 7 or something like that, that too much sleep gets me drowsy the entire day. My whole life, they always said sleep 8 hours, and I'll try to force that, and it just makes me drowsy. And I realize if I'm in bed for 6.5 hours and I fully sleep 5.5 hours of that, and I have this ring that tracks that, that's my perfect hotspot, a sweet spot where I'm like I feel alert the rest of the day. But that's led me to like wake up really early, and I have a team across the world that's helpful on that. So I get to do meetings with my team members and clients across the world at an hour and time that suits them. And when they message me, like they're like, "What time is it in Los Angeles?" I'm like, "Oh, it's 4 a.m." They're like, "Alert City here, I'm a meeting at 4 a.m." I'm like, "Yeah." And it comes out really impressive. Now, to me, I've got used to it. We got 3:30, 4:30. When people tell me that doesn't make sound like a big deal. But I remember before I would wake up this early, when people would tell, "Oh, I wake up at 3 or 4:30," they're like, "Are you crazy? I can't wake up at 6 a.m. or 6:30 a.m., let alone 3:30 or 4 to get working." And so it's always, frankly, it's an impressive thing to know that this person's taking the early bird gets the worm metaphor literally, and really getting there. And it's been so helpful in getting work done so early in the morning and sleeping early. It takes away from the ability sometimes to have nightlife. When you would have said 9:30, you might want to watch a video or something like that with your wife or something like that. But so let's do stuff a little bit earlier so you wake up earlier and get business done.
Oh, I totally hear you on that. I've been fighting my wife to try and watch like a Netflix series. It's just something that we can consume together. But I mean, she's one of these people who prioritizes a lot of work she tries to prioritize health, but it impacts obviously her life when she works late. Sleep recovery, it's all an issue, but then also like the relationship. So absolutely prioritizing it is a big deal. It impacts a lot. But and in saying that, then the question is that what do you find is the stuff that has fallen off for you in the past, or was something that really wasn't high on your list?
Well, like I never thought about how important the sleep was. So even before the baby came, sometimes I would be working late into the night and then waking up early, and that was really bad. There were times where I just sit in the chair for 7, 8 hours working, and it's terrible on your body, and it destroyed my lower back. You were really helpful. You introduced me to your friend Tyler, and I had to work for like 6 months with them to get my back pain well. Because I literally would walk at like an old man. I was like crooked like this walking. I couldn't straighten my back. I couldn't sit in a car and drive for more than 10 minutes without back pain. It was straight up debilitating. I was like an 80-year-old man from sitting down and not moving because I was working so much. And with training for him, and then I got my personal trainer, came constantly moving. I got a standing desk. I forget to use a lot of time. But it literally just breaks down my body from working too much. And the back pain I had, it's just mentioned right now, I remember how bad it was. My body kind of tensed up. I literally couldn't stand straight. I couldn't pick up my kids. We'd go out to Disneyland or something. I constantly had to sit down. I'm like 36, 37 years old, and I can't go to Disneyland and walk with my kids. So it was really bad.
Wow.
And so I'm like, something's got to change. And so, a lot of us comes with having financial resources to do this, but we're like, okay, I'll throw whatever money is out there, and I was able to get it solved.
Wow. Well, amazing awareness and responsibility and ownership on that part. And it sounds like you said, it's something that you've taken 6 months to work on. That's incredible. And I think that also shows the value of your tenacity in solving problems. So that's incredible. So my question is,
there's a commitment to it too, because whenever I'm working half an hour, I was working 3-4 days a week, half an hour to 45 minutes. That's a huge time commitment there that takes away from work as well. So it's not only the investment of paying the person, but it's the investment of not making money I could have made. So you got to make these decisions. It's like, I might be losing out on thousands of dollars, but I'm probably going to get tens of thousands of dollars if I do this right. And so it's always this investment. Like the hiring thing. I'm going to hire this person too early right now. I'm going to pay them a salary for 3 or 4 months before I even have a job for them, really. But it's because I believe I'm going to be growing and getting. I need to do this stuff ahead of time to be ahead of it instead of being late to the game.
Well, this is exactly the next question, which is how did it affect your leadership? And I think you've outlined this question beautifully to talk about this idea of it's always a trade-off between your short-term wins and your long-term victories. Like losing an hour right now to work on your back so that you can work far more hours long-term healthily. There's really a smart way to do it. There's a smart trade-off and there's a poor trade-off. And, personally, I find a lot of the leaders, especially in places like startups, a lot of the bosses are short-term wins. They're under so much pressure. A lot of leadership is under so much pressure to answer to shareholders, investors, people above them, things like that. And there's a certain amount of freedom that comes from obviously, being your own boss. With those choices. But in the same sense, all you need is to think about it rationally, and it makes a total amount of sense. So that's incredible. So what else did you notice with your back? How would that impact you and your productivity, your leadership style, whatever?
Well, I couldn't do anything. I was I couldn't sit down for long periods of time. I was thinking about pain mostly, so it was a big distraction. I couldn't spend time with my family or my wife. I couldn't get out of bed because I know getting up, from a lying position, standing up, it was really pain. So I have to roll over and do this kind of stuff. And it's just it just messes you up completely. So I'm I just got to do something. I can't keep going up like this. And it affects my leadership because
if I'm late to a meeting or the team members see I'm kind of distracted, am I not fully there, or I might not have a good attitude because I'm in pain, I might snap at them, for example, just because it's not intent towards them. It's just I have less patience because of the back pain.
So it's dude, we got to do it. Now, it's crazy. I hear a lot of successful people on hella drugs and taking all these different pills and stuff. It's unbelievable. So hopefully people don't take the easy way out. Sometimes you can't. You have back pain or something like that. You have an accident and you get hooked on this stuff and you got to do it, I guess. But just try to find the natural ways to cure yourself and heal yourself as much as possible.
100%. Yeah, I'm a big believer in skills, not pills. Yeah, so that's yeah, that's a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, lucky. I mean, you introduced your friend. I'll give him a plug again, Tyler, who has this natural way of doing things, and it sounds kind of weird at first, but he been in. I was like, oh wow, it worked. It's who would have thought? It was totally worth it. I even got my lead associate. I got a couple of months of sessions for her. I said, okay, she had some shoulder pains and stuff like that, and he helped cure her. She thought she was never going to have. She was a tennis player growing up, and she thought her life she was going to have to deal with pain. That's just the way it is. And he was able to solve it for her too. So I wish I could give him his website or something like that. Give him a shout out. But
no, I'll definitely shout out to Tyler, and I'll link his website in the show notes for this episode. So yeah, I'm sure he's very thankful for the shout outs. Yeah, that's amazing, and kudos on the job that he's doing. Clearly, so that's great, wonderful, cool. So you mentioned in the beginning, you're an international man of mystery. You know, you're originally, your family line is from Iran.
Yeah.
And so the question that I've got for you there is, obviously you've got a taste of different cultures, and knowing the difference. Personally, I've traveled the world. I've lived in 7 different countries for at least a year at a time. And, I've experienced a lot of different cultures, and, you do get those uncomfortable parts where culture is difficult to translate. You do get those beautiful parts of what you can experience in one culture that just doesn't exist in another. You get those structural parts of how people organize in one culture and not another, things like that. So my question for you is, like, obviously as an international person, how does living across cultures affect your business, your style of leadership, how you work?
It's the adaptability most than anything, to know that people are different. So I've just dealt with them. And what I've seen is, I think the difference from East to West primarily is like individualism versus group kind of mentality, herd mentality. It's kind of pejorative. I'm more on the individual side, but I understand the other side. And Iran in particular is at the middle of the Silk Road between Europe and China. So it always culturally had a way of mixing East and West together, which gives me certain benefits and to be able to adapt to this stuff. But having an international team, I can understand where they come from much easier when I deal with clients for international locations there. And we're in America, so it's an international place. Frankly, it's a little bit of everyone in the world. It's really easy for me to talk with somebody from anywhere and quickly be able to adapt to the way they are and not be shocked by it, and be able to adjust and just fully understand the perspective they're coming from. Because sometimes there's 2 right answers or something. It doesn't mean their answer is wrong. It's just a different way of doing it. And it's the flexibility it gives me not to be uncomfortable with new things, new ideas, new ways of doing things. Just knowing that there's different ways that people do things. And you're an expert yourself on multiple languages. I've practiced learning languages. I don't speak any Farsi, English. I speak. I speak mildly a bunch of languages just because I like the process of learning about it and the perspective it gives about that culture. And sometimes they're really different. Like we learn Chinese, that their wording of how they use stuff is completely different in English and stuff. And it's like, okay, the words are the building blocks for how they think. So when you see when they ask for something, it's a completely different sentence structure and plural or first singular, all this kind of stuff that they do in the Germanic languages or English based or Farsi, which is they have the same roots. It comes interesting to see that affects how the people may think and how they may think the same way, but you got to go about things differently to get to the same location with them, and just being okay with that, knowing that that's the case.
Wonderful. Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said. I think the whole point about like this relationship between how people think, how they approach a problem, that's of course huge. So yeah. Well, speaking of which, culture is something that influences us a lot. But we hear nowadays as well people talking about business culture. What's the culture of the workplace? What's the culture of the team? And so once again, it's one of these words that so many people throw around different definitions. But if I asked you to define what is work culture, and in particular, what would you say the work culture of your team is, or that you're trying to create? How would you do that? What would your definition be?
It's such an important concept. All the business books, they talk about, business culture, and it sounds sometimes like it's one of those things they make up in academia and stuff like that. But the bigger you get, you realize you can't be watching out every aspect of the business. The only way you can do that is have certain principles that everyone goes by that develops the culture that exists. So the expectations we have of people and how they can succeed in this environment, that is, the culture, I guess, how we interact with each other. It's really about all the interconnectedness of the business without, a leader watching you. How do you expect yourself to act within that sphere on your own. Just like in your household, you might have a culture in your community. In East Asia, they may find something appropriate or inappropriate, whereas in the US, we might find the opposite, that thing being appropriate, inappropriate. And so we got to set the tone of what it is in our business, what we can expect. If someone doesn't reach that, they'll know on their own whether it's bad or good. So we don't necessarily have to tell them, hey, why did you do that? They already know what it is. And just a week or two ago, I was watching TikTok, and my TikTok has a good feed because I just bring this stuff that's, educational. I don't watch any weird stuff on there. And this one woman who was a very successful businesswoman is talking about, if you hire somebody, or if you're being hired, the question you got to ask, or even if you're already hired, ask, what are the 3 things to make me stand out to be a star in this business environment, in this business? I'm like, well, that's great. So I thought about it, and it comes out of more than 3, what I say, but I told my team, first of all, I expect your work to be high quality and have speed. The more you do that, the more you stand out. So it shows the importance I give to high quality and not lagging on things. Secondly, it's about what kind of development you can have for the business. Like, what can you come with ideas to help the business? Might not always do them, but always, your mindset, the culture is, how can we help this entity to grow, because it's going to help us grow? And third, personal development. How can you become a better person yourself? Because that's going to help both business and yourself personally. Are you going to learn another language? Are you going to go be exercising? Are you going to go meditate? Are you going to be with your family? Although it doesn't have direct correlation to the bottom line of the business, it does in the grand scheme of things, and it's going to make you a better person. And that that's an important thing. So if you come and tell me I signed up and I go to the gym every morning, I'll be like, that's good. I like that. And that's the reason for you to be part of this team more, and still more comfortable in doing this kind of stuff, because it helps us out better. So it's 3-pronged, of the core work of speed and quality. Secondly, how to help the entire business. And third, how to help yourself as a person. This is what I find important. And from that, it breeds our culture to see what values we have. Those are 3 things we value, with, of course, helping our clients, helping the business, and then helping yourself, and these together.
That's incredible. Well, can I come work for you? No, I think you nailed it on the head. And one of the biggest points about work culture as well is obviously like talking about value systems, and something that you didn't necessarily mention in your answer, but I know because we have that relationship that we've discussed before, is your emphasis on family values. For example, you're in this to make sure that your employees are supported as well. They've got that kind of family perspective too, and you want them to know that you place value on that as well. So there's a lot of leeway that comes with that. And I think that, talking about work culture, there's a lot of big corporations that obviously discuss work culture, and our culture is this, and they have a chief happiness officer or something like that, or a chief culture officer, workplace culture officer. And the only time that you need that is usually when there's a breakdown of culture.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's a big deal. And so kudos to you on not having a chief happiness officer.
Yeah, sometimes when you just like, there's companies who name themselves, like, I don't want to get live or something like that. Once you put a name on it and make that active, that means there's something going on. Sometimes if you do things right, you don't have to highlight it. If your entity that has 100,000 employees, you might need that extra push, but you might name someone else. That's not to be too nose on it, but yeah,
this is it. Yeah. There's a huge belief that I've gotten. I'm like talking about, going into keynote speaking. And one of the keynotes that I've been drafting up is this idea of like, what is the future of business in the West? Because these, places with 100,000, when you go that big, you add in so many layers of red tape, and you take away and you diminish responsibility. And there's a humanity that's lost, that is typically in the leader's values for the team as well. And so it could be instituted back in, but usually it's something that's absconded. Like the leader basically says, well, I'm not responsible for the value system, the work culture or whatever. That's the bigger corporation at large. And so, it's always a touch point. It's always something that's very difficult to discuss. But so it always lights me up when I hear people doing culture in a human way, the human approach to it. So fantastic.
As we're growing, I had this idea of creating this structure of like having multiple levels of management. Okay, you are managing this, and this person on you. Then I'm like, that all of a sudden it's like 4 or 5 tiers of people till it gets to me, and so that's not good. So I cut that out to make it more to avoid it being too vertical of a system. So it's more the hierarchy doesn't go that big, because it attaches team members from each other. And then whenever we're talking, always, everything comes from the lens of these values. So how do we connect to these values? And if it's not going there, then we got to stop. because, sometimes like we'll have the opportunity to make like some money here and we jump on it.
But that's a distraction. Like, well, is this other opportunity going to be helpful to the bigger picture?
When I started my firm, for example, I made the decision where I'm not going to do asylum law, for example. This is people who want to file for asylum in the United States. Primarily, one reason is in the U.S., so many people file for asylum that the case could take 5, 6, 7 years until it's fruition. So that's a difficult thing to do, have a case that lingers on every 5 or 6 or 7 years. That's a difficulty there. I like my case to be done within a year. And then secondly, it's an emotional toll where people who have gone through the asylum or need to claim asylum in the United States. We got to sit hours and hours and talk about a lot of emotional stuff, the torture they went through, they had to escape, all this kind of stuff. And after doing it a couple of times, I was like, emotionally, my heart can't take it. I'm gonna start crying, and I'm not a good advocate in this sense because I can't handle it. So I carved that out. Said I'm not going to do these cases. But when I was first starting my business, I was struggling. We had these cases coming. I had to say, sorry, I can't do this. It was hard because they wanted to hire me. Or I had a friend of a friend who needed an employment lawyer.
And at first, he was going to pay really well, and I was helping him with employment law.
I was actually making more money on the immigration side. But I made the decision where I'm going to be an immigration lawyer, and that's the value I place on what my future goal is and what kind of identity I want to have in this field of law. And so I tell him, listen, I know you're paying me every month. It's a good job, and you're paying me well. I just got to say no to it because it doesn't go to what my goals are. And that worked really well for me because I've seen people who become lawyers and like, well, let's just do everything MD comes in. They never really take it to the next level because they're just a jack of all trades in a sense. And that in law, especially having a niche is really important to be able to succeed and be an expert and have the qualifications you need. So just always looking through a lens of what are the priorities, what are the goals, what are the values, the principles. And if it's outside that, can we make it fit there? And if it doesn't fit, then we can't do it. And does this employee fit there? Does the talk I gave yesterday, does that fit there? Does the plans we had, does it fit there? And always go back to that litmus test of as a pastor or not. If it doesn't, we got to stick to what we're doing because we've made the decision. This is our plan. This is what's going to take us to success. And you have to revisit that. I've changed my business plan once I started a team, not to adjust certain things. There are other cases, like for example, the H-1B that we wouldn't do at my firm when I was solo. But now that I have a team that can handle it, and we have certain other amenities that can allow us to do it, we opened it up and handle that case type. But before we did it, but we got to readjust accordingly, but with thought, not just to do it just because there's some money at the door and say, okay, throw away our values, just get that money. That's not a long-term strategy for success, in my opinion.
Wow. What can I say? But just wow, I can imagine how the asylum seeker kind of work could have been heart-wrenching. And then, likewise, the employment side of it is great money. But like you're saying, following your heart, such a big deal. And again, one of the values that I'm sure you bring into the workplace culture too, and pull out of your employees too. So wonderful. So I mean, this now brings us quite onto a very interesting part, which is just obviously like, what other parts of your life do you find your role as leader being engaged? And in this particular way, I'm talking about as well, like you said, your emphasis on long-term over short-term, or any of the decisions that you've made in business. How are you finding that you're engaging those business frameworks onto regular life as well?
Looking back, it really just came about over leadership in my personal life. So when I was a kid and I was seeing my life not going the way I wanted to, is taking leadership and say, listen, body, listen, tongue, listen, ears, eyes, muscles, we're going to go this direction because what we're going right now is not going to get us where we want to go. So it goes back to when I was, different times in my life. When I was 8, I was 12 and 16. There's different times. I remember when I was like 9, I was very sensitive and always cry. I would get offended really easy. One day I was just sitting there crying because someone said some slight to me, like a cousin. I was like, am I really just going to sit and cry every time I get offended and complain? It's like, well, who cares what he said? I remember that occasion and really, okay, I took leadership and said, listen, we're not going to do this, body, mind. We're not going to do this anymore. And then there was other times, I remember when I was really lazy and I was like 14, 15, and I was sitting in front of a TV and eating chips, and the chips ran out. And I was like, I don't feel like getting up, but I want to get some more chips and have a Coke. And the TV show was coming on, the 5th show that I didn't really want to watch, but I was just through cable. I was like, you know what, dude, I'm like 15, 16. If I go on this track in life, this is going to suck. If I'm just sitting here and I'm complaining about not being able to getting a bag of chips because the TV show is on again. Like this, and so I took leadership and I said, listen, we're not going to do that, body and mind. We're not going to do that. And then it just goes in, just the different physical stuff in my body, into my family, the leadership role I have, and all the stuff we're talking about here. This video, hopefully my children see it one day and see what my goals are, where I've come from, so they can take the lead. Right now, it's too small for you to understand it, but when they get bigger, these are things that I learned through hard life. My dad was a very successful person, but he's never communicative. He could have shared a lot of his knowledge with me and given me a heads up and fast forward a lot of this, but wasn't successful. And hopefully, sometimes when you give the information for free, people don't do it. You got to go through the hard knocks yourself to do it. So it might be the case for them as well. But at least it's there for myself and for other people to fast forward the process and to take it to the next level. And I have to go through the difficulties I have to go through to do stuff. They'll have their own set of difficulties, but it won't be these. They'll be farther down the line. So that leadership in the family comes into place. But then it's business, and the business, thinking about it because you're more overtly thinking about it because it's a business, that reopens the pathways in my head where I did leadership, but I just didn't know it was being leadership. But I see it now that I'm more actively thinking about it because of their own business. And a lot of people,
because they're employees, they never think about it like this. And it's a problem when it comes to the country. There's a lot of people want to attack business owners. It's fair in some certain senses when it's these, some corporations that, are in partnership with the government and steal all the money. So they're not necessarily making all the money because they're being gains to society. It's because they're hookups and stuff like that. But when you look at small, medium-sized businesses where people have to struggle to fight every day to make that stuff going, to want to, jack up their taxes to some crazy numbers, like there's people that hustle and sacrifice to get what they're going. For people to just consciously think about leadership in every position that they are, will give them much more respect and understanding of the difficulties people go through, and it'll really help society. But unfortunately, because we're in a society where it's like big corporations, little people, as opposed to society where it used to be a lot of small shop owners, small businesses, people don't have that idea anymore. They're always thinking of themselves as employees. If they want to get health insurance, they have to go work for somebody to get health insurance instead of having enough money themselves to start their own business to pay for their health insurance.
And that's a big thing I think is problematic in the country. We need people more lead and do what they can. But unfortunately, it's not a competitive environment. It's very hard for a person to start a business. The costs are high, the taxes and regulations are high. So it gives the incumbents, who are the people already there and doing big stuff, disproportionate and unfair advantage. And that's just, it causes people to just stay in their place and become employees, which a lot of people end up being employees. But I think we need more people to start small businesses and take from there.
Thank you very much for joining us on this podcast. If you'd like to hear more, I asked John, what are the top 10 skills of a business leader and how to actually implement them as well. If you'd like to see that, please sign up down below because that is for subscribers only to the Substack. You can find a link down below. Thank you very much.